It's out. The most significant leak of UFO-related documents in many years, perhaps of the century, is out. People are beginning to talk about it. Some have even called this the most significant leak in UFO history ever. What is clear is that this is important. It is very important. The public conversation we will be having about these documents is only beginning. And there is no doubt in my mind that it will continue through the remainder of this year, and I think for years to come, until it is surpassed by something even bigger, if that were to happen. I am talking about the Admiral Thomas Wilson documents. These are in relation to Vice Admiral Thomas Ray Wilson. This is a man with a long and distinguished career in the United States Navy. Wilson was director of the Defense Intelligence Agency from 1999 until 2002. In fact, I'm going to show a couple of images here, some screenshots to help guide you along in this. Forgive me if they are slow. As you know, if you watch these live streams, I'm not perfectly expert in sharing documents quickly. This is an image of Thomas Wilson, however. He was director of the DIA from 1999 till 2002, and prior to that, he was director of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and deputy director of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs. This is a position known as J2, and Wilson held that from 1997 to 1999. So the basics of what I'm about to tell you have been known by a few researchers. Let me stop sharing here, if I may. Including myself. I have known about the fundamentals of this story for many years. And a lot of us, including myself again, have discussed this series of events repeatedly. I've done it countless times. But until now, we have not had the documents to prove what we're alleging. I first began discussing this in one form or another back in 2007, 12 years ago almost. Other individuals like Stephen Greer and the late Apollo astronaut Edgar Mitchell have also made many statements, some direct, some indirect, about what I'm going to be describing to you here. More recently, researcher Grant Cameron has discussed this, and even more recently, the attorney Michael Hall has talked about this. And indeed, it was Mr. Hall who released these documents that I'm about to show you. I will point out that there is an excellent chronology of all of the statements put out. I'm going to show you the link here by Giuliano Marinkovic. This is a very, very fine article called the Pentagon 1997 UFO Briefing. I don't know if this is a complete chronology of all references to this, but it might be. It is certainly very thorough. So, what are we talking about? What we're talking about are notes by Dr. Eric Davis that were written down on October 16, 2002. Now, who is Eric Davis? Here's an image of Dr. Davis. Here we go. He is a scientist, but he's surely much more than just any old scientist. He's a very interesting scientist. For many years during the 1990s, Dr. Davis was a member of the National Institute for Discovery Sciences, which of course was owned by billionaire Robert Bigelow. That's NIDS. NIDS was a very important organization back then. It brought scientific rigor to many interesting areas of research connected to UFOs and beyond, frankly. The mystery of the Black Triangles, for instance, and most famously, the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, something Dr. Davis was very much involved in studying. Davis is also a very close associate of Dr. Hal Puthoff. Dr. Puthoff owns a scientific company, Earth Tech. He, of course, has an extensive career in science and the world of intelligence. Both of these, along with Russell Targ, Hal Puthoff developed the protocols for America's classified remote viewing program in the 1970s and 80s. He is an expert in zero-point energy. He's written papers on what is called space-time metric engineering. Think about that for a moment. And of course, Dr. Puthoff has worked very closely with Robert Bigelow on many occasions. He is an integral member of To the Stars Academy, TTSA, Hal Puthoff is someone I have known for many years, and I've said it over and over again that he is someone who has always quietly been trying to help the cause of UFO disclosure. That is my judgment on the matter. I've known him for a long time. Also, in my own judgment, and I'm surely not alone in this, Davis and Puthoff are currently engaging in some of the most important scientific research related to UFOs in terms of their work on the now famous artifact from an alleged UFO crash, let us say, which contains what's known as metamaterial and possesses incredible properties. I've discussed this elsewhere, so more on that another time. The bottom line is that Eric Davis is not just any scientist, but he is a scientist with a deep appreciation and solid scientific approach to certain areas of what we might call the fringe. And through his association with people like Bigelow and Puthoff, Dr. Davis clearly has been able to have had access, at least from time to time, maybe more than that for all I know, to powerful individuals like, on this occasion, Admiral Thomas Wilson. So these notes, there's 15 pages in all, were written by Davis in the aftermath of a meeting he had with Wilson in October 2002. I'm going to assume it was written the same day, which would be October 16th, but I don't know that for a fact. They concern a series of events that took place during the spring of 1997. And this is when Wilson was Deputy Director of Intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, what happened during that meeting was a discussion of very great importance. How do we want to put this? It concerned nothing less than a confirmation of the existence of deeply classified programs, or at least of one program, to study alien technology. That is extraterrestrial aliens. Let's be clear about this. That is their craft and all related technology. Now, as everyone knows, claims and more claims have been made over many years regarding this. I've discussed this countless times, and so have many other researchers. But these leaked documents, they're not the first leaked documents ever to offer the claim of alien tech programs, but they are the most compelling. And unlike, say, the various MJ-12 or Majestic documents, there is no argument over their authenticity. These documents are real. And we need to be clear about what this is. It's not a classified statement from the president or even from Wilson himself talking about the reality of this program. However, it is a wholly credible series of notes by a scientist who only intended for this to go to an extremely limited group of close colleagues. And as such, it has exceptional credibility. And moreover, the amount of detail and of specific names that are cited in this document make it obvious that this is all very real. I believe it will be impossible to debunk this leak as a hoax or fabrication. At most, skeptics might argue that somehow these men were given wrong information, and that's really the most that they'll be able to say. But as you're going to see, this is also not a credible argument. So the full 15 pages, I'm going to show them all to you briefly. You will be able to screenshot them, and I would really recommend, in fact, you just go to the website where they are located. The website is an Imgur page, /a/ lowercase gg, capital I, F, T, lowercase f, uppercase Q. Images right there. This is page 1 of those documents. And I'm just going to scroll through the 15 for you here. And of course, you can always go to the site and look at them. Oh, actually, let me start at the beginning. This is page 1. Page 2. Pages 3 and 4 are a letter, which I'll talk about in a moment. And page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, page 12, 13, 14, and 15. All right. So those are the pages of the document. Now, I'm going to walk through these, and I have some screenshots of close-ups, so we'll be able to follow along with all of this. This is very important to understand this. So as I stated, the note is dated October 16, 2002. There are names contained in here that I don't know all of the names of all the players that are listed in here. Undoubtedly, others will identify everyone in them. But most of these names are searchable and they are identifiable. So what we know from the notes is that Eric Davis and Thomas Wilson set up to meet at around 10 a.m. And in fact, Wilson was about 10 minutes late. Davis makes this note in there. He arrived with 2 Navy officers in uniform. He himself was wearing civilian clothing. He had recently left the DIA at this point. So according to the notes that Davis writes, the 2 of them sat in the back of Wilson's car for a little over an hour. And the impression that I get is that that is the entire when this conversation took place. This is in back of the EG&G Special Projects building. One interesting thing about EG&G Special Projects Division is that they operate the Janet Terminal at McCarran Airport in Las Vegas. This became famous, or you could say infamous, notorious, as the airline to fly employees and contractors to remote government sites in Nevada and California. We're talking places like Area 51. Anyway, Davis began asking Wilson about a very important meeting dating from April 1997. At the time, this was known only to a very few people, but it involved UFO researcher Dr. Stephen Greer, Apollo 14 astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell. I believe I got a picture of all these gentlemen. Let's show that. There's a 1990s Dr. Stephen Greer, Edgar Mitchell, and a Lieutenant Commander Willard Miller, who the 3 of these men working together met with Admiral Wilson and 2 other individuals. I don't have their images, so I won't show, but they were Admiral Michael Crawford and General Patrick Hughes. Now, in Edgar Mitchell's recollection, the date was April 9th, 1997, and later in these notes, Wilson gives the same date. So we're going to assume it was April 9th, 1997. The Davis's notes don't explicitly state what this meeting was about, but this much is known through statements by Greer and Mitchell, which is that it was to bring the attention of these government officials to the existence of deep, black, and let's say rogue private organizations involved in studying alien technology and alien bodies, and essentially needed to be brought under formal control by the U.S. government, or we'll say something reasonably close to that. Now, one thing that came up in the notes is that, let me show a screenshot of this here. They brought to the meeting a brand new book. And this is a very well-known book. It's The Day After Roswell by Colonel Philip Corso. Of course, this book brought forth the allegation that at least some of the technology recovered from the Roswell crash in 1947 was segued into private industry. It's a very important claim. People have argued back and forth about Corso. Turns out, in the aftermath of Wilson's 2-month adventure, which I'm about to describe, Wilson became a believer in the fundamentals of Corso's thesis. So, all right, so Davis's notes gloss over this part of the meeting, that is with Greer and Mitchell and Miller. However, let me make sure I've got the right slide here to show you. Good. But what he does focus on is what was discussed after the formal meeting. This was a 2-hour conversation between Lieutenant Commander Miller and Admiral Wilson on, and this is the quote they have, on UFOs, MJ-12, Roswell, and crash retrievals. And here's a screenshot of that part of the notes. I would like you to see this. So the notes are in the form of basically TW's Thomas Wilson, and then you'll see initials for Eric Davis later, but this is Thomas Wilson. Davis's notes state that Wilson confirmed the Greer, Miller, Mitchell, gave a talk in the Pentagon conference room and indicating the names of the other individuals after the group broke up. Miller and Wilson talked privately for 2 hours on UFOs, MJ-12, Roswell, crash UFOs, alien bodies, etc. And it's very interesting. You know, one of the things here is that Wilson was intrigued by this. And in fact, Wilson said that he knew about intelligence on the U.S. military intel on UFO close encounters and foreign government encounters, and that he had seen the records, and you can see it right in there. Now, that's a very interesting statement, is it not? Remember, this is 1997. This is a full decade before the start of the ATIP program, which everyone knows about by now, and didn't start until 2007. And we're told over and over again that that was the beginning of a government investigation into these mysterious UAP. Well, let's guess again here. You'd sure like to know which records Wilson was talking about when he said he'd seen the records relating to these close encounters. And these, were U.S. military intelligence information on close encounters. So I think it's a fair statement to assume that these were military encounters with UFOs. All right. So, but then we come to the first major bombshell of the document, and we're only at the bottom of page 1 here. In Davis's notes, Wilson confirmed that he was able to confirm in June 97 that, quote, there is such an organization in existence in relation to MJ-12, UFO, cabal, crash UFOs, so forth. Now, at that time, this is late June 97, Wilson phoned Miller, this was in the notes that I just showed you, and said, yeah, you were right. There is such a group, there is such a cabal that manages the crash UFO program. And we're going to have a lot to say on that, as you will see. So then Davis showed Wilson, they're in the back of Wilson's car. He shows him a letter from Willard Miller, who was corresponding privately with him. And let me see if I've got that accurately here. Perhaps I don't have the, here we go. Yes, this is a section from the letter that I want to show you now. So he shows him a section of, well, he shows him a letter, which I'm showing you this section of. So this is a letter. It's dated 2002. So it's just a few months before the meeting that the two of these gentlemen had. And this is a letter that makes it clear that Davis and Hal Puthoff were engaged in their own research into crashed UFOs, and they're trying to figure out all the players within the government that have anything to do with crash UFOs. So one of the very interesting statements in Miller's letter is that he would be able to provide Davis and Puthoff with, quote, the name and last location of a senior officer who I believe had firsthand knowledge of U.S. government and alien reproduction vehicles, ARVs, at Area 51 and associated locations. Lots of talk about the ARV or ARV. I've heard this for years. Other researchers have looked into this for years. The argument that the United States, at least since the 1980s, frankly, had been in possession of their own attempts to replicate these alien flying saucers. This effort may go back much earlier than the 80s, but we know about it from a story that is from 1988 from a very good source. In any case, there's more here from Miller, including, quote, the name and current location of a retired senior flag rank officer, he said, who I believe was directly involved in government interaction with a significant UFO event on the East Coast of the United States, and I believe has, by virtue of its former leadership position, high military rank, and control of significant military forces, direct knowledge of U.S. government involvement in this business. A long statement, but very important. And then Miller also wrote that he had a list of civilian contractors with likely involvement in alien-derived technologies, crashes, landing, and associated events. Wow. So Davis shows Wilson this letter, of which I just read part of, and Davis's notes indicate that after Wilson read this, he laughed, and he said, hey, I didn't tell Miller everything, whatever that means. And then Wilson said that, quote, Miller can make good educated guesses on which contractors have alien hardware. And he also said Miller could give good advice, or can give good advice on which defense companies to look at. And Wilson said, and that's all he knows. So clearly Wilson knew a lot more. In Davis's notes, you see that Wilson was also angry that Miller, who was a fellow Navy officer, basically betrayed the trust of their conversation by relaying it to other people, notably Stephen Greer, and in Wilson's view, who knows who else. He believed that he informed journalist Leslie Kean, who wrote an article on UFOs for the Boston Globe. I don't know if that is the case or not, but that apparently is what Wilson believed. Davis's notes added that Miller only seemed to have told Edgar Mitchell, who was the one who told Davis about this meeting in 1999. So who knows how that all worked out. Another thing that's clear in these notes is that Wilson was very nervous, even to talk with Davis. He agreed to it on the recommendation of a colleague, a mutual connection, and he said he was taking a risk just by talking with him. And now we see, indeed, 2 decades later, the whole thing leaked out, and now the world is talking about it. So then we get right down to it. David says, all right, look, can you describe what happened in the time frame of April 1997 to June 97? I'm again going to show you these direct quotes from the notes. So Wilson said, sure, about a week after I met with Miller, so presumably mid-April or so, he made phone calls, knocked on a few doors, talked to people, and this whole saga went for about 45 days, he said, on and off. The way that Wilson investigated this is worth consideration. He said he received a suggestion from a General Ward, General M. Ward, we're told, to search through the record group files in the OUSDAT office. I don't know if I'm even pronouncing this correctly. OUSDAT, that is the Office of the Undersecretary for Defense and Acquisition and Technology. This is a very important office. And after doing some searches, I believe I learned who General M. Marshall was, and I actually think it's General H. Marshall Ward. And I will show you just a quick bio I found of him here. And I believe that he, in fact, is the individual because soon after 1997, he became director of special programs at the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Technology in the Pentagon. So I'm going to take a wild guess and assume that he's the right guy. Even more interesting during this time is that Wilson ran into, as he says, whoops, let me go move on to here, Secretary William Perry. William Perry was Secretary of Defense of the United States from 1994 until 1997. He is an extremely important and powerful figure. He is still alive. He's 91 years old. You go through Perry's biography and you can see that he's a man of exceptional intelligence and ability. It's clear he knows all the right people, and he has probably always known all the right people. What's fascinating to read is that Wilson told Davis that he ran into Perry in May of 97. Let me see if I can get this correct here. There we go. Sorry about that. I don't want to get ahead of myself. In May of 97, Perry had left the Office of Secretary of Defense just a few months earlier than this. And he said that he and Perry, Wilson and Perry, had talked about this quietly. That is the entire claim about UFO retrieved tech programs that existed within the Pentagon. Perry suggested, just as General Ward had suggested, that to go through the OUSDAT records. Again, this is Defense Department records pertaining to acquisition and technology, which makes perfect sense. Wilson then said, he said that they told me, and I'm not sure who the they are here, but it seems to be Ward and or Perry. He said, they told me of a special projects record group not belonging to the usual special access program, but rather a special subset of the unacknowledged / carve-outs waived programs. Again, not belonging to the usual SAP divisions, special access program divisions, as organized by Perry in 1994. These are set apart. This is Davis's notes describing Wilson, he says, this program was set apart from the rest, but buried or covered by conventional special access programs. This is a very significant statement. Special access programs are the primordial black budget programs that infamously are nearly completely outside congressional oversight. It has been understood for a long time that in this environment, many of the programs are beyond oversight, not just of Congress, that's a given, but often of the armed services themselves. I mean, they're dominated, they appear to be dominated by private contractors, often over the Defense Department officials and liaisons themselves. So here Wilson is telling Davis that he learned that this UFO crash retrieval program had been buried within or under these standard, if you might want to say a standard special access program or standard black budget program, not belonging to the standard organization of how these programs are set up. They are set apart, is what Wilson was saying. So he then mentioned a couple of other names in this regard. Researchers can really look into them. They are Paul Kaminsky, General Michael Kostanek, Judith Daly. She was the Assistant Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Advanced Development of AUSDAT. Out of this, Wilson told Davis he did find this unusual record group. The budget information, as he learned, seemed very high, but then he said maybe that was just errors in the way the budgets were reported. Davis is getting a little antsy at this point. You can tell he says, look, let's get back to the main point. In what special access compartment did you find it? And I'm going to show you the screenshot again of, here we go. This is a very relevant page. There's many relevant pages. This is one of them. So he says, what SAP compartment did you find it in? Wilson says, core secret, won't say. A lot of core secrets in this section here, apparently. Davis's code name, Wilson says core secret. Davis says, who is the project contractor or the government agency that ran the program? Wilson, all he would say is top aerospace technology contractor. And Davis wants to know who was it? And he's like, Wilson says core secret. Davis says, can you hint? Wilson says, sorry, no, can't hint. Then we get to really the climax of this story. Wilson said that he made 3 calls. Let's see if the next slide has this here. Here we go. Yes. 3 calls to the program manager. So he finds the program, calls the program manager. One of these calls was a conference call with the program manager and 2 other individuals, the security director of the program and the corporate attorney. Very interesting. So Wilson points out these guys were not happy to hear from me. He says all of them had a testy tone with me and they were all confused. Like, why are you looking for us? What do you want to know? And Wilson indicated that they were agitated and surprised by his phone call. So he says to them, look, I've read your program record in the AUSDAT Special Programs Records Group, and I want to know about your crashed UFO program, what your role in it is, what you had, and so on. And he also asked, this is actually kind of amazing when you really think about it, he asked them directly if they'd heard of MJ-12 or any related organization code to crash or recovered UFO craft. So he puts all of that out on the phone. It's just a breathtaking moment. You have the Deputy Director of Intelligence of the Joint Chiefs of Staff attempting to inquire about a UFO crash retrieval program by contacting the private contracting firm that appeared to be responsible for it. Now remember, he's talking to the program manager, the security director, and the corporate attorney. So Wilson tells them, he says, I demand a formal briefing on this program. Again, I want to share you the relevant screenshot here. And he said, I am doing this on my authority as Deputy Director of the DIA and Joint Chief of Staff J2, that's Head of Intelligence. He says, by not having me involved in this, this is an oversight on your part and you need to correct it, he says to them. So then they have a very interesting reply. They said, well, we need to discuss this and we will get back to you. So that's interesting, right? And he said, look, we will get back to you and we will arrange for a face-to-face meeting and this is how we're going to settle the whole thing. So indeed, That face-to-face meeting took place about 10 days later. We're now in, according to Wilson's timeline, around the middle of June 1997. He flew out there. That's what he stated. And he said to a conference room in a secure vault. And there he met with the three individuals. He said they were the program director, the corporate attorney, and the security director. By the way, he noted that the security director was retired from the NSA and was an expert in counterintelligence. So, interesting thing about this group is that they called themselves the Watch Committee or the Gatekeepers. And the reason they called themselves the Watch Committee or the Gatekeepers was because some years earlier, they told Wilson, the entire program that they were running was nearly outed during a Pentagon audit investigation. And they were there to ensure that the program remained ultra secret. And they mentioned that on that previous occasion, let's see if I have a screenshot for this. I do indeed. I want to show you this page now. So you can just kind of read along here with me. They indicated that on that previous occasion, they were forced to brief the government investigator because apparently that person learned too much and wouldn't be brushed off. In the aftermath of that episode, they somehow made a formal agreement with the Pentagon to prevent, from the Oversight Committee for Special Access Programs, to prevent any type of exposure like this to happen in the future. So what this means is that they implemented exceptionally tight controls over allowing any U.S. government personnel into the program. And what they pointed out to Wilson is, says, look, your public status, your public rank are irrelevant. All right, you are only going to be able to get entry to our program by meeting our criteria. And these were, they wouldn't tell them what the criteria were. The criteria that we determine, we decide. And as Wilson put it in his notes, he said that it was like it was their way or the highway. And he was very angry. You know, he pointed out to Davis, and he said it was my opinion then, it's my opinion now, that this group was operating without proper oversight from legitimate U.S. government agencies. And furthermore, he said he learned that the purpose of the meeting was to deny him access. And I would like to show you that screenshot. Here we go. So here's one page where they describe the formal agreement to prevent this from happening in the future. And here's a screenshot where he says they were not really going to let me in the door at all. All right. So he was upset that they were operating without official oversight and so forth. The next page on this, I think, is also significant. So he, he learns that his credentials as government authority were, although they were proper and they were valid legally, officially, for him to have oversight over what they were doing, that was actually not a matter of question or argument. But he was still not on the bigot list. What is the bigot list? That's a term in the classified world. It refers to people who are cleared to have a need to know. Basically, that's all it means. If you're on the bigot list, you're in the program. And so these gentlemen, these three men, are telling Admiral Wilson he did not have a need to know. So they get a very angry back and forth going on here. It certainly looks like Wilson did have the proper official legal authority to be demanding what he did, but it did not matter. So now the next part is interesting. Wilson's making all of these arguments why he should be on the list, and they pull out their list. It was last updated in 1993. That's 4 years before the meeting, the bigot list. And they show him who is on this list. Davis is like, do you have any names? And Wilson says, no names. But he did say, like, nearly all of the names on this list were employees of the company. He did not recognize any military names. He did not recognize any politicians. He did not recognize anyone in the White House, no one in Congress, not even congressional staffers. He didn't recognize any names from the Clinton or Bush senior administrations. He said there were a small handful of names who were Pentagon officials. That was about it. And it was otherwise dominated by these private contractors. So then he got down to some more detail with Davis. Program manager says to Wilson, all right, a little bit about our program. So we are not a weapons program. We are not an intelligence program. We are not any kind of special ops or logistics program. So Wilson apparently asked, well, what kind of program are you? And when he does that, there's this loud groan from the program manager, but he's told by the security director and the corporate attorney, apparently it's all right, you can tell him. So they tell Wilson, we are a reverse engineering program of technological hardware. Let me move to the slide. A reverse engineering program of technological hardware that was recovered in the past. Wilson immediately wonders, Soviet, Chinese, and they say, no, not Soviet, not Chinese. That's not what we're talking about. They go on and say, we have an intact craft that they believed could fly. That's interesting. All right. It's interesting that it's A, intact, and B, that they hadn't yet figured out how to fly it, since they said they believed it could fly. It's very interesting to me. So all of this made it clear to Wilson that, we've got something very big here. And then they say to him, they didn't know where it was from, although they had ideas about that, they said, but that this is the really important moment here, that it was technology that was not of this earth, not made by man, not by human hands. And I want to show you that screenshot one more time from the notes right here at the bottom. Program manager said they didn't know where it was from. They had some ideas on this. It was technology that was not of this earth, not made by man, not by human hands. All right. They also indicated that this project had been continuing for years and years with agonizingly slow progress with little or no success. Again, screenshot. Here we go. You can read along here. There is a described as a painful lack of collaboration with the outside world and a very, really remarkably small number of cleared individuals, anywhere from 400 to 800 who were cleared for this. Is that on this page? Or, oh, I've jumped ahead here. I beg your pardon. This is the slide you want to look at. Okay, they were trying to understand and exploit the technology. Their program was going on for years with very slow progress, agonizingly slow, painful lack of collaboration, and so forth. I want to stop and just discuss this a little bit. Well, I want to come back to that point actually toward the end. So I want to talk about the fact that it was slow progress. To me, that's a very significant statement. But let me move on here. So Wilson asked some specific questions relating to UFO history. He asked about Roswell. He asked about MJ-12 and other things. They wouldn't talk about any of that. They wouldn't answer. Wilson's getting angry at this point. He says, look, I'm going to complain up the chain of command about this. And their answer was, go ahead. Do what you feel you need to. I wonder if I can share that here. Here we go. Yeah. No, not yet. That's a little bit too far ahead. I will show that in a moment. They said, go ahead, do what you feel you need to do. They apparently didn't seem too perturbed by Wilson's threats. And roughly at this time, the meeting seems to have broken up. Wilson did complain. He complained to SAPOC. That's a Special Access Program Oversight Committee. And they said to him, sorry, we're on the side of the contractor. You are out of luck. And I will show you that slide here, that part of the notes. So again, this is Wilson talking to Davis about this. So the Oversight Committee said to Wilson, you're out of luck. What you need to do is drop this matter immediately, and you need to forget about it. Wilson again gets angry. And they said, look, They threatened his career. They said, if you do not comply, you will not get promoted to DIA director. You will get an early retirement and probably lose 1 or 2 stars along the way. So that was that. Wilson, a couple of months later, this is really the last, I would say, very significant piece of data in this document, and people will be talking about this for a while, I'm sure. So in January 1998, Wilson spoke to a man named Jacques Gansler. And by the way, Gansler just died in December 2018. I have an obit of his from the Washington Post. He was a very highly regarded man. He was 84 at his death. And he was just then, he had just been put in charge of the acquisitions and technology. So very, very important. And Wilson says to Davis during the meeting that Gansler had been briefed by someone, didn't know who. He seemed to be surprised by that fact. And Davis, of course, asked, well, what did Gansler say to you? And Wilson's answer is very interesting. And I'm going to show you this screen. So let's do that first. So Wilson's answer is that Gansler said to him, UFOs are real, so-called alien abductions are not. And Gansler also said to Wilson, you better drop this. No more discussion about it. We're done, apparently. So that's essentially all of the notes. Other than Davis asking Wilson if he would meet with Hal Puthoff or Dr. Christopher Kit Green. In the notes, Wilson seemed to indicate actually that he was hesitant to do that, probably not. There's more in these notes, go through them. There's more detail. I've given what I believe are the fundamental important points of this very important leaked document. It's the basics of what's in there. And of course, they are available now for anyone to read. And I have no doubt that they are going to be read and analyzed by many people. I will just say this is an extremely important leak of information, all right? It strongly indicates what many researchers have been arguing for a long time, that there is a deeply classified program existing within the labyrinthian structure of the U.S. Defense Department system, that this is hidden away from any meaningful oversight, and it is studying at least one alien UFO. It's important to note that, or at least to recognize that these notes do not mention the recovery of alien bodies. Apparently, Wilson wasn't told one way or the other about this. At least there's no indication in the notes. Now, of course, information about alien bodies has come out from quite a few excellent sources, and a few of them have come to me over the years. But what we have here is a snapshot of an incredibly important program to study alien technology. Now, it's interesting that in this scenario, progress in understanding the technology was described as painfully slow. This is what I was nearly going to talk about a few minutes ago, but I want to get to this now. Painfully slow progress. That would surely seem to call into question, at least, some of the more spectacular claims of secret black budget progress, right? Stories like the alien reproduction vehicle, for instance, to say nothing of some of the more incredible claims made by people over the years. It's not that some of these claims are invalidated by the Wilson documents. I would not argue that. And ditto the statement that UFOs are real, but not alien abductions. I don't believe that these documents refute the scenario of alien abduction just because one official told this to another official high up in the Defense Department. What we know is that this was told to Wilson by someone who had been briefed. Okay. What we don't know is how truthful or accurate it was. Was Wilson told that abductions don't happen because maybe that was considered even more sensitive? Don't know, just speculation. But the thing is to keep all of these possibilities in mind. Now maybe it's true. Maybe they somehow made their determination, or maybe that wasn't a truthful statement. But nonetheless, we have to keep this open here. What we have is ultimately is a very powerful statement of a small group of people, really, Dr. Eric Davis, Dr. Hal Puthoff, Dr. Kit Green, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and a few others, no doubt, working quietly and working very hard to learn as much as they could about the deep nature of the UFO cover-up. That's what's very obvious in all of this. They're working their way through this labyrinth and truly hitting pay dirt with Admiral Thomas Wilson. There's no use in denying the reality of the meeting between Davis and Wilson. And I think there's no use in assuming anything other than that Wilson was being completely truthful to Davis. The notes speak for themselves. It will be interesting to see how all of this plays out. There's the UFO research community and those who follow that community, which in the grand scheme of things is fairly small. I can guarantee you that that community will be incorporating this document into its big picture from now on. The real question is how this will affect the broader culture. Right now, we're moving in a very well-defined direction towards some form of disclosure on UFOs. I've been calling it controlled disclosure lately because, well, it's been tightly controlled to produce a certain spin on the phenomenon. One thing that is definitely being left out of that narrative is the nature of the cover-up itself. The controlled disclosure has involved a rebranding of UFOs into something very mysterious, something maybe otherworldly or maybe not otherworldly, right? They're describing them as UAP now instead of UFO and all of that. What they're doing, in a sense, in rolling out this new narrative is creating a kind of fiction. It's a convenient fiction, and maybe it's a useful fiction for getting the word out to the mainstream. I'm not saying that there is no cause for it, but I am saying it is nonetheless a fiction. But these notes blow all of that apart. Here we see true runaway secrecy, no oversight, angry, upset military and government officials who frankly had a right to be upset. This signifies the existence of a truly secret world. Now, I've been arguing for years that if we want a healthy society, we need to get on top of this. We need to recognize there is an enormous discrepancy between the official truth and what's really true. We need to stop lying to ourselves, and we need to stop allowing ourselves to be lied to. It's not that there are no genuine causes for having secrecy in this world ever. I don't know many people who are that naive who think that, but secrecy, especially long-term secrecy of information that is of great transformative power, that kind of secrecy is a cancer to our societal well-being. It forces the established powers to continue to lie over and over again. And it makes us learn not to trust our own judgment, our own senses when we see or learn something, or else it trains us to distrust our very establishment because we know they're lying to us. It's a bad place to be. It's not healthy for any society, and it needs to stop. Lies can dominate a society for a long time, but ultimately lies are exposed. Every lie has a finite life. Ultimately, truth is always going to win. Having access to the truth doesn't ensure that we're going to be able to fix all of our problems. That's never easy, right? But not having access to truth ensures that we're never going to solve them, because we'll never have access to the information we need in order to solve them. I know that the people involved in this leak are unhappy that it's out, but I would simply want to remind them that posterity ultimately is going to benefit. This needed to come out. Well, thanks for being here with me. If you like what you see, why don't you like the video, subscribe to my channel, and if you want to learn more about what I'm up to and more of my thoughts on this matter, please go to richarddolanmembers.com. Meanwhile, thank you and catch you next time.